John Updike is here. Since the release of his first novel in 1959, he has published more than 50 books, as well as essays, reviews, poetry, short stories, and book reviews. Along the way, he's won numerous awards, including 2 Pulitzers and a National Book Award. His new novel is called Seek My Face. I am pleased to have John Updike back at this table. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Psalm 27. You speak in my heart and say, seek my face. Your face, Lord, will I seek. That's the title.
Nicely read. Yes, with the idea that we all, or many of us at least, are seeking his face somewhere, and that the pursuit of art is one way to seek his face. And my heroine is a Quaker-born Philadelphia girl who sublimates her religious training into an ardent desire to be an artist. She actually marries artists, but is herself one, and by the end of the book has emerged into her own style.
Let me get right at it.
Yes, yes.
Jackson Pollock is here. There is the notion that Pollock sort of pervades this, and also Lee Krasner, who was Pollock's wife. We have done an hour program on Pollock on this program because of Kirk Barnadoe, the great curator at MoMA at the time. What were you about here?
Well, you know, I saw that show that Barnadoe curated, and what struck me as I walked through it was this muddy, tangled, rather displeasing early stuff, a lot of it. What a struggle he made you feel painting is. And this kind of surrealist murk mixed up with the Mexican muralists. And then in the late 40s, you get this sunburst of marvelous dribble paintings, which are so radiant and exciting and beautiful, beautiful. So you get this burst of beauty, and then you get a rather rapid decline and early death. So it's a dramatic life, and you can see why other people are interested in telling it. I had no interest in telling it again exactly. So my hero was not called Pollock. He's called, what, Zach McCoy. Right. Zach McCoy, and I think McCoy was Pollock's actual.
And Lee Krasner is called Hope.
Right. And I cannot deny that Zach McCoy is very like Jackson Pollock. But
not totally. There are differences.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You notice. It's fiction, after all.
Exactly.
Fiction. And certainly Lee Krasner was a much less demure and proper woman than my heroine, who is a Quaker wasp and so on, and who lives on. Krasner kind of died with him. At least she never remarried. She kept the house as kind of a museum, lived in it. But, you know, she lived, but my thought, as I tried to remember what made me want to write this book, it was something about, suppose Lee Krasner hadn't stopped. Suppose she'd gone on, and so on.
2 characters in here, both females. Young reporter comes to interview.
True.
You have said you had to have female characters. It couldn't be male characters. Or something to that effect. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You help me.
No, certainly I always saw this as 2 women, and I saw the central situation as that of an interview. And I've given a lot of interviews. I mean, it seems to me a lot, maybe not as many as I could have. But
you've given a lot to me.
I've given a lot to you, and as with you, you get a relationship, right? You get a kind of love begins to kindle. Right. You put 2 people, especially 2 women, in the same room all day, and things will slowly start to happen, was my theory. And they had to talk about something, so that's why Hope is a artist and a witness to the great American move in the 40s and 50s and to the international stage. For the first time, we were world leaders in art. At any rate, yes, Catherine is the young woman's name, and she's unknown to Hope and kind of unknown to me when she walks in. She never becomes terribly real. But real enough, let's hope, and real enough so that Hope spills everything she knows, everything she feels to her eventually, after being somewhat reserved. That's the way you interviewers are, of course. In the end, you're trying to coax stuff out of this, and then this torrent comes out, and you can't stop us.
Yeah. I found some interesting quotes, and I want you to just remark about them. Philip Roth, Updike, Mailer, and Bella were all together on the great ride. They were there when fiction mattered, and fiction mattered in part because they were there. Only the very thing that made these artists avatars of the self-seeking liberation culture is now their unmaking. Not because we as a culture have ceased to focus upon ourselves, but because they have, as writers, have fallen victim to the law of diminishing returns. The self, however grandiose, is finite. The wells dry up.
That's a sad passage and very eloquent, isn't it? Did Sven Berkutz write
Yes, sir,
that?
he did.
He's a bright guy. One wouldn't want to argue with him. And maybe it's all true, but, you know, so what? I'm stuck with being me, and I'm still alive, and I still like to write, and I still think I might find some other things to say. So, but yeah, the exploration of the self, I never believed that myself was that interesting, but it was sort of all I had. These are two women who do not have my career. I mean, I am trying and have tried to stretch my imagination a bit, but in the end, yes, you have to kind of begin in the self because that's where the hot spots are. That's what really interests you. That's your song to sing, and then being a fiction writer, you try to extend it somewhat to include the rest of humanity and make it more general of interest, because in the end, you're not that interesting. You're interesting only in that you are an index to human experience.
Yeah. What is interesting about you, too, though, I mean, do you think there is a law of diminishing returns here? I mean, do you think that you are less good, less...
You'd hate to admit that. Certainly on the Charlie Rose Show would be a very poor place to confide it to anybody. I'm not as full of material as I was when I came out of Pennsylvania and discovered that I could sell words. I had 22 years of experience, impressions to spill, and I have kind of written those through. I've been a steady, plodding kind of writer. So it's not so easy. You don't have that full of material thing, and if I were to stop writing entirely, Sven Berkutz is right, the world would not long grieve, but I would grieve, and I think in some ways I'm a better writer than I was. But you can't, the kind of energy and innocent hopefulness, full of himself, that a young writer has is hard to top in the way all the crudities and all the innocence get carried along with your own urgency.
In what ways do you think you're better?
Well,
because you have a deeper well to draw on?
I've known more people and had more experience, and I have the unegocentric perspective of elderliness to give me, I hope, a certain wide-ranging, calm look at things. But I wouldn't sell short the need to be excited by what you're trying to say. I did get excited in this book. I was excited by the art, by the history it contains in distorted form, but also I was excited by the way the women began to connect.
It's okay, and it's equally good and powerful as anything else you do, to use as Tolstoy did with the war, Napoleon.
That's right, Napoleon, the real Napoleon. Well, I guess Jackson Pollock was my Napoleon. I have been taken to task with leaning so closely upon the actual facts, although I did vary them a bit, and of course couldn't get them all in. A very good biography of Pollock was written maybe 10, 15 years ago, which I read. If you're going to write about a Pollock-like artist, it's very hard not to make him Jackson Pollock, really, basically, and to try to hide that would just involve me in a lot of unnecessary ingenuity.
Right.
As the book goes on, once it leaves, I saw the facts as kind of a flower pot that I was growing a flower out of, and the flower becomes more fictional as we go along, and that the artists cease to be, you can say he's Barnett Newman, and
right. Well, you use characters with names, which are
and then which are kind of anagrams.
They are kind of anagrams,
yes, they are. So it's kind of a joke between people to know. I'm saying, okay, yes, these
are the guys.
This is my notion of the New York school,
and I am drawing on them. Yeah, I'm creating characters.
Yeah, but then I wanted to go beyond it and really write about hope, the idealist from Philadelphia, and how her whole life has led her to this quiet moment in old age when she is kind of herself at the canvas. She's painting the way she should have been painting maybe all along, but she had to live a life to get there.
Is that sort of, what's the story what you are writing about this interesting event in which a young interviewer comes to interview Hope at the end of her life. But what are you really writing about? Are you,
I'm trying to write, about the experience of being old and being approached by a young and vital person to talk about yourself. In other words, you still have some business with the world left to conduct. I wanted to write about this moment in American art that she witnessed when the New York School wowed the world, and was witness to a kind of idealism and passion that I don't think is present in any of the arts now.
There is no question about that.
As a young writer living in New York, I used to go out to MoMA and just walk around and kind of inhale the feeling, the colors, the look, the daring of it all, and the comedy of it, and the boldness. And I thought there must be a way to do this in print, kind of. And so it even rubbed off on me, even though I wasn't in the same field. And I think it's hard to see that art became, with pop, it became irony, and it was very amusing and good irony, but we're still stuck with the irony without that bardic feeling you had of pop, of wanting to say, yes, this is a Coca-Cola bottle. Isn't it grand? Isn't it beautiful to have a Campbell's soup can?
Yeah.
You don't get that now. You don't know what they're saying.
Why not?
I don't know. The coming and going of energy in the arts is a very mysterious thing.
Sure.
There was a lot of energy bottled up in America, I think, by the Depression and the war, which was able to burst forth in the 40s and 50s.
It was a magical time.
It was fun to be youngish then. It wasn't, for a number of reasons. And these people were so wide. And there was one passage I was thinking of reading.
I want you to read it, too, and I have a question for you, too.
It's hardly maybe worth reading, but when I did my research, I was struck by the extravagance of some of these remarks. So I imagine a conversation in which somebody like Clifford Still is holding forth in the Cedar Bar, and he talks about something coming up to the toenail of the sublime, and Myrtle Strunk, who's married to another imaginary artist, said, "My goodness," Myrtle Strunk had to exclaim, sitting wedged against her husband, "the toenail of the sublime. Jarl," his name is Jarl Anders, "Jarl, how high would you say you have risen? The ankle? The kneecap?" "You mean to mock," he stated. His torso was rigid as the dark, near-abstract shaman figures prominent in his work. "But I will repay your discourtesy with an honest answer. Since 1941, I date the year precisely as more momentous than any puffed-up events at Pearl Harbor. Space and the figure in my canvases have been resolved into a total psychic entity, freeing me from the limitations of each, yet fusing into an instrument bounded only by the limits of my energy and intuition. My feeling of freedom is now absolute and infinitely exhilarating. A single stroke of paint, my mocking Myrtle, a single stroke backed by a mind that understands its potency and implications can restore to man the freedom lost in 20 centuries of apology and pictorial devices for subjugation. Imagination, no longer fettered by the laws of fear, becomes as one with vision. The act, intrinsic and absolute, becomes its meaning and the bearer of its passion." I didn't make that up. That was taken pretty much from things that he said, Clifford Still. He was maybe the most grandiose of them all, but there was a grandiosity in their ambition, in their sense of themselves as being creators of a historic moment. They were innocent in a way. It was an innocent sort of sweet thing to feel that.
People frequently ask me, who is it that you most want to interview that you haven't? It comes to me. And on any list of 5 for me is Jasper Johns. I try hard, and so far he says...
You've not succeeded in wooing Jasper Johns.
Not yet, but hope springs eternal in my mind, because I am going to Paris soon for a second conversation with Henri Cartier-Bresson. So
he's still alive.
He's still alive at 94, and I just had lunch with him about 3 weeks ago, and he's remarkable. And they're getting ready to do a huge retrospective on him, who was also powerful during the same time in France in terms of what he was doing.
Wonderful
artistically. You believe the interviewer is the enemy of mystery.
Yeah, I do believe that, but not as strongly as Jasper Johns seems to believe it. He really believes it.
No, I think Jasper Johns is simply a shy person. I don't think it's because he objects to the process. I think he's shy.
And who might say that his painting has done his talking for him.
They all say that.
They all say that. I think an interviewer wants to get at the human core of the artist, and a lot of his endeavor is to turn that core into something else. So, and I feel that too as a reader. I'm interested to know what Stephen King is really like, or what he really thinks. What is he trying to do? And all that. But the artist is trying to defend this castle that you've made.
Here is my argument on my behalf. And you have been gracious with me, and we've had discussions about every aspect of life, whether it's golf or sexuality or relationships or divorce.
The two key things.
Yeah, two things for us. If you are a conductor, what you want to know from the score is what was Brahms' intention. What was he doing, or Bach, or anyone else? Why isn't that a legitimate inquiry for me?
Maybe because you're not a conductor. Conductor needs to know. He needs to inhabit the mind.
Well, maybe I'm defining John Updike by doing this.
I think you're entitled, you and the public behind you are entitled to ask any questions you want. You mustn't be disappointed if the artists don't have the answers or give not your answers. It's a strange thing why some people are led to think they can create art. What irritation leads us into this delusion, I don't quite know. But it is, somehow it's just not enough to say, I believe so-and-so. You want to construct another world.
That's an interesting. Irritation creates art.
Often, I think so. Yeah, irritation. Something you can't do any other way, like maybe I don't speak very well, but when I sit down and write, I can make it come smooth, that kind of thing.
This book is called Seek My Face. John Updike. He is, at this conversation, a delight, as he has been at every conversation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir.